Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for this opportunity to present this project. This is actually very much work in progress. Together with Men of Anger, we are both employed at the University of Erasmus University in Rotterdam. And I will start my presentation with some background information about this project. So basically, we built on previous research on labor market inequalities between immigrants and natives, and a particular finding in the migration literature that arguing and showing that similar human capital does not pay off as much for migrants as for natives. In this previous research, human capital is mainly measured by educational credentials and work experiences. And the researchers trying to explain, why migrants receive lower economic returns to their educational credentials and work experiences. They argue that education acquired in the countries of origin, also work experiences, are of lower quality, meaning that immigrants who acquired education in the countries of origin, they have less skills. And also difficult to transfer. And this is related to the argument that many migrants come from less developed, economically less developed countries as compared to destination contexts. Another argument explaining this differential returns to human capital is about employers' uncertainty. And here it's argued that basically employers very often have difficulty in evaluating education, for instance, from the countries of origin. More recently, also in the migration context, there has been some attempts to add other measures of human capital, such as cognitive skills. For instance, there has been some recent evidence about the importance of numeracy skills among migrants. However, if you look at this research, it's mainly focused on natives, and for instance, there has been no research on the importance of non-cognitive skills for migrant population. So this brings me to our project, where the main goal is to provide a better understanding of the importance of cognitive and also non-cognitive skills for immigrant labor market integration. And in this particular presentation, we focus only on earnings. There are three research questions which we will try to answer is, are migrants' cognitive and non-cognitive skills different from those of the native born, and if so, in what way? Also, do immigrants receive lower economic returns to cognitive and non-cognitive skills than observationally similar native born workers? And also, can differences in levels but also economic returns to cognitive and non-cognitive skills explain differences in labor market outcomes between migrants and native-born workers. So we derive hypotheses based on human capital and discrimination theories. So I will start with human capital theory. So here, basically, the main assumption of human capital theory is that migrants will benefit from their cognitive and non-cognitive skills, because the skills are positively related to individual productivity, which in turn should facilitate labor market outcomes in terms of labor market entry, but also later outcomes such as earnings. In this context, some researchers have argued that particularly non-cognitive skills are important because these skills are very difficult to automate, and so are important to take an advantage of new technologies, also to adapt to changing work environment. So based on these arguments, we basically expect that cognitive and non-cognitive skills will have a positive effect on labor market outcomes of migrants. In addition, because unlike foreign credentials, skills used on a job can be directly assessed by the employers, they should reduce concerns about, for instance, lower quality and portability of migrants' human capital. So based on this argument, we expect that the economic returns to skills are actually similar for migrants and natives, and differences in the levels of skills should explain immigrant-native inequality at the labor market. With regard to discrimination theory, another alternative explanations of labor market inequalities between migrants and natives could be that employers discriminate against migrants, which results in lower economic returns to skills among equally qualified migrants as compared to natives. There are different explanations why this happens. So taste-based discrimination would argue that employers basically have a preference not to offer a job, for instance, for migrants as compared to natives, or in our case, to offer lower earnings for migrants as compared to natives. However, there is also alternative arguments provided by statistical discrimination, which would argue that employers basically are uncertain. There is information asymmetry with regard to their knowledge about skills immigrants possess, and because of that, they are less willing to basically provide equal pay for migrants as compared to natives. Because in our analysis, we focus on already employed migrants with some job tenure with a current employer, we actually argue that taste-based discrimination preferences is more likely explanation if we find support for this differential returns to migrants' skills. So based on the discrimination theory, we hypothesize that the returns to cognitive and non-cognitive skills are lower for migrants than for observationally similar natives. And these are differences in the returns to cognitive and non-cognitive skills which explain immigrant-native disadvantage at the labor market. As many papers here, we use the PIAAC data, which has been collected in 24 Western countries. For our project, it's very important that it has rich migration, comparing to other similar data sources, rich migration background information regarding, for instance, country of origin or region of origin and location where education was obtained. Our analytical sample is about 14 countries, EU countries, and this is driven basically by a small migrant population in some European countries, men and women between 16 and 65. And the total sample which we are analyzed for estimation of earnings is 39,000 people, majority of whom are natives. Regarding our main variables, so we focus on hourly earnings in the sites because this variable is available in all countries which we are examining. With regard to cognitive skills, we use numeracy and literacy skills. In terms of, in the context of our sample, literacy skills could be also a proxy for language proficiency among migrants. I think I don't have to explain how the skills for this population, for this audience, how the skills are measured. Maybe what's very important, our soft skills or non-cognitive skills refer to definitions used in other research, measures of self-regulation, management and communication skills, and also organization and planning skills. And in the PIAAC data, these are measured by 3 scales. So the first one is readiness to learn, which is based on 6 items, measuring different learning styles. The second scale is influence, which again, it's measured by 6 items, indicating management and communication skills, and also task discretion skills, which are measured by 4 items, referring to planning and organization skills. It's maybe important to mention that influence and task discretion are only measured for employed migrants. So that's also the reason why we can, in terms of economic outcomes, we can focus on earnings or occupational status. These are all provide quite reliable scales in terms of Cronbach alpha and also factor solution. Regarding methods, we use or less regression with country fixed effects. We use also repest command developed by OECD to account for sampling and imputation errors for cognitive skills. It's also important that in each of the models, I'm not showing these control variables, the effects of these control variables, but we will control for gender, partner, having children, also age, educational attainment, and whether education was obtained abroad. We also run analysis with additional controls such as work experience, job tenure, age at migration, and foreign language at home, whether people use a foreign language at home, and the results are robust across these specifications. So I will start with the first findings related to the first research question, and we actually here mainly focus on non-cognitive skills. Here is the comparison between native-born and foreign-born from Western and non-Western countries. And basically you can see, if you look at the distribution of these three skills, readiness to learn, influence, and also task discretion, you actually see the same pattern. So in all cases, native-born have much higher levels of these skills. In terms of readiness to learn, the difference is significant only between non-Western migrants and native-born. In terms of influence and task discretion, the differences are significant for both migrant groups. It's also important to mention that maybe in terms of influence, so these are management and communication skills, here we actually see that the distribution is more bimodal, so lots of workers actually score very low on the skills, meaning they use very little managerial skills at their work, and then another peak is around 3. Regarding the regression analysis, basically we use the stepwise regression. So in the first model, we simply include different migration categories. The reference category is native, plus control variables, which are not shown in this presentation. In the second step, we use different measures of cognitive and non-cognitive skills, and then we basically enter individual interaction effects. What you can see in the first model is that there are significant differences in terms of earnings for Western and non-Western migrants in the predicted direction, showing inequality in earnings. However, we can see in model 2 that these inequalities are completely explained after taking account for differences in cognitive and non-cognitive skills. In terms of the effects, we see that all types of skills, but not all, but particularly numeracy, also influence and task discretion, they are significantly related to earnings. Regarding our hypothesis about differential returns to cognitive and non-cognitive skills, we actually find very little support for this hypothesis. So actually, most of the interactions are not significant. The only difference is the returns to numeracy skills, which are significantly lower for migrants, both Western and non-Western migrants, as compared to natives. So to conclude, so in line with human capital explanation, we do find that cognitive and non-cognitive skills are important determinant of labor market outcomes. These effects are quite substantial. So for instance, one standard deviation increase in numeracy scores, which is in our sample 54 points, increases earnings by the same amount as moving one level up on educational scale. And education here is measured on the scale between 1 and 6. Regarding the effects of non-cognitive skills, particularly influence and task discretion, are important. The effects are a bit smaller, but also substantial. What's also important, and I didn't present the findings for educational attainment and also education obtained abroad, but we could see that cognitive and non-cognitive skills explained 1/3 of the positive effect of educational attainment and also 1/5 of the negative effect of obtaining education abroad, which suggests that indeed, for instance, some of these penalties migrants receive for foreign diplomas is associated with different levels of cognitive and non-cognitive skills. What was also maybe striking is that we didn't find a significant effect of literacy skills. However, it's quite, the literacy skills and cognitive skills are highly correlated, which, and in a model where we only include literacy skills, this effect was significant. So in line with human capital explanation, we didn't find evidence for ethnic differences in economic returns to literacy and non-cognitive skills, which actually may suggest that in terms of workers currently with some job history with a current employer, employers are better informed about their employees' skills. There is also previous research showing that discrimination is particularly large among job seekers, so the situation of the job entry. We did find that the economic returns to numeracy skills were significantly lower for both migrant groups, so this could suggest evidence for discrimination. As I mentioned before, our results are robust to different additional control variables. So in terms of this outcome, we could conclude that the differences in skills, but not in economic returns, explain immigrant-native inequalities, which again relates more to human capital explanation rather than discrimination explanation. That's all. Thank you.